Great. So now we are back. Hopefully you had a little bit of time to explore Padlet. There are a lot of tutorial videos out there on how to use Padlet, how to set up Padlet, and they're a lot better than what I would present. So I would check those out if you're interested in exploring Padlet for use in your own classroom. So here are some key tips for social emotional learning and Padlet. Make sure you're using the privacy setting. You want to be able to control for your student safety who can see what they're posting. You also want to make sure that students introduce themselves and possibly add an image that represents them, not necessarily a picture of themselves. Give students a place and time to share what they're doing that's keeping them positive. So like, again, even in the Padlet space, maybe create one Padlet that's just for this social emotional sharing component and connecting, and then another Padlet would be something that is for the academic purpose. And for yourself, make sure you're collaborating with your peers for more ideas. A lot of these tools have resources, including teacher-created resources. So when we look at open environment conferencing, so things like Zoom, things like WebEx, things like any of these things, the easiest way to set up a social emotional space is actually to open up the conferencing 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes before your scheduled meeting, and just be there, monitor the conversation, but let students have some free time to talk to each other. What I'm finding is within my classes, my students are showing up half an hour early because they want to socialize. Sometimes they show up early and they have nothing to say. So I always have a couple just silly, interesting questions to get them started talking to one another in that space before class. You can schedule small group student meetings with 4 students from the class, just to make sure you're giving time for them to be able to communicate with each other. I'm also doing office plus social hours. So I have a scheduled time. Right now it's every day where I open up the conference bridge, and I just have it open for an hour for students to be able to come in and socialize, for them to be able to come in and ask questions. It's beyond a normal office hour to where they can ask me questions, but they can also use a breakout room and have a small group conversation. You want to make sure that you're communicating to students that this is the case, that it's both for social and academic, and where which pieces will be, that the chat will be for academic questions, the audio will be for social, breakout rooms will be for et cetera, et cetera. You want to really think through how you're setting that up before you move into it. So here are some sample prompts that I came up with. You can come up with probably better ones for getting students to be social in the space. The most popular one right now is asking for recommendations on books, movies, shows, music, things that are helping students and us teachers manage things while we are staying inside. What's one food you recommend everyone try once in their life? Would you rather be 13 or 65 for the rest of your life? And possibly sharing a picture of something you love, not someone, and then use audio to have a discussion about it. So that's a really good one for K2. So for more formal conferencing, you want to have an idea of how many rooms the conference platform you are using can support. The other day, I went in with a huge group of people, had 10 rooms planned. We got in and discovered there were only 8 rooms available. So check that out before you go in. Just a tip from someone who learned the hard way. And then figure out how students will be placed into rooms. When you're looking at one-on-one conferencing support that you want to provide to students, think about both synchronous and asynchronous, discussion boards and email, ways that you can help make it so that the student is most comfortable communicating with you. And I have a quick little breakout room routine here on the right. So when I have my students go into breakout rooms, similar to how I have them do in groups when I have them do group work in a physical class, I just have them do a really quick introduction and something about themselves, something low stakes like your favorite pizza topping, to help them start making those connections. Then I instruct them to set goals for accomplishing their task. And then it's really important to once again give them materials and descriptions of group roles and giving them a little time to be able to figure out who's going to take which role. And you want to make the roles something that they have to communicate to do. So my favorites, my top three, are the critical listener, the person who's listening to and asking critical questions about everyone's comments within the group, everyone's ideas. The connection maker is the someone who every few minutes they'll say, okay, guys, hold on a second. Let me just summarize what we've just done. Here's some of the connections that I'm hearing between the ideas that we're bringing up. And they just kind of give the summary as you're going through. And then the flow master. And the flow master is the person who keeps the conversation going and ensures that everyone's voices are heard and kind of attends to the time that they're taking, attends to how much longer they have in the breakout room. But all of those roles really require communication and they require students to interact. So when you're setting up roles, you want to think about those things. Another way to provide students with avenues to be social and to have some social emotional time is to look at different collaborative tools. What I have here are Google collaborative tools, but most learning management systems have some form of shared documents, drawing space, sheets, forms, etc. So I have a few tips here if you want to pause and take a look at some of the things you might do. Take a look at that, and then the next slide is actually going to give you some images of some of these examples. So here we have on the left an example Google form for checking in, asking the students, how are they feeling today? What are they excited about? What is something they want to know? On the right-hand side in the top, we have a sample spreadsheet. One of my elementary school friends posted something similar to this on Facebook as a great idea for scheduling smaller synchronous conversations with students, and I thought it was brilliant because parents can go in and sign their student up for times that are more reasonable for them. Sometimes we have houses where there's one device and 3 or 4 or 5 children. So being able to utilize that device in a really kind of more fluid way is really important. And then at the bottom right-hand corner here, I've just got an example of giving students spaces in Google Drawings to be able to make a drawing, to be able to share their drawings, to be able to communicate with others about, hey, that's a great piece of art. If you're going to have students use any of these things to communicate with one another, one of the things you're going to want to do is provide them with guidance on how to provide feedback to one another, how to be supportive. So here are my cautions around social media. In the United States, we actually have a federal law that children under the age of 13 are not supposed to have social media accounts. So as a teacher, we often have a lot of experience using social media ourselves, but you really don't want to be using that with children under 13. I'd even say if you have a student who's over 13, between 13 and 18, still be cautious because the last bullet on here is that you are a mandated reporter 24 hours a day in both virtual and face-to-face spaces. So it's sometimes better to not feel like you have a responsibility to follow all of your students' social media to ensure their safety. So my recommendation is when you're going to use social media, use it to communicate with parents, families, and communities. Make sure that you're using district approved or ministry approved secure apps with your students. Keep your students safe. Provide guidelines for parents and families about sharing any communication or student work on social media. We know that sometimes parents are very, very proud if you're using something like Flipgrid in your classroom and you're sharing that with the parents so the parents can see the students' work. That parents are sometimes very proud and want to post things in their Facebook or on Instagram about what their student did. However, we need to remind parents that there may be other students in the background and it is not safe for them to post images and things of their students' work out in the social media universe We want to protect all of our students' safety. So finally, here is a pre-K to second grade modifications suggestion. Actually, the first one applies to everybody. Less is more. Use the synchronous time when you're meeting for some social and engaging activities, and only the pieces of the lesson where you really need to be talking to one another. Take your number of things you thought you were going to do today, cut that in half, then cut it in half again and go deep with fewer things. Take students into a place where they can do some independent learning, they can do some questioning, they can do some inquiry. Ensure that students can still engage with one another in kind of a quote unquote online recess. And invite older relatives and caregivers as assistants, especially when you're doing the social emotional learning time of any kind of mindfulness activities. Invite them in so they can also learn mindfulness to help their students cope when they're not online. I will also have a podcast up about mindfulness with ideas for mindfulness. It's something very helpful for parents too. And try to, especially with K2, keep things active. So this final list here is a beginning list of some web resources. Teaching Tolerance, Common Sense Media, and the Center for Reaching and Teaching the Whole Child all have got social emotional learning resources. And what I'd like to do is say none of us is as strong as all of us. So please post resources or ideas for social emotional learning in the comments below. Please make sure you're considering accessibility and feasibility in your suggestions. Thank you so much.